President Obama talked about Syria's civil war in our PBS interview. He rejected criticism that he should have decided earlier to send arms to Syria's rebels.
Now, these folks are carpenters and blacksmiths and dentists. These aren't professional fighters. The notion that there was some professional military inside of Syria for us to immediately support a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah, but there were former Syrian generals who were part of the Free Syrian Army.
There were those who were a part, but I don't think that anybody would suggest that somehow that there was a ready-made military opposition inside of Syria that could somehow have quickly and cleanly defeated the Syrian army or Assad or overthrown it. And one of the challenges that we have is that some of the most effective fighters within the opposition have been those who, frankly, are not particularly friendly towards the United States of America, and arming them willy-nilly is not a good recipe for meeting American interests over the long term. The last point I'd make on this is, a lot of critics have suggested that if we go in hot and heavy, no-fly zones, setting up humanitarian corridors, and so forth.
Heavy artillery.
That offers a simpler solution. But the fact of the matter is, for example, 90% of the deaths that have taken place haven't been because of airstrikes by the Syrian Air Force. The Syrian Air Force isn't particularly good. They can't aim very well. It's been happening on the ground.
So you think a no-fly zone is not necessary?
What I'm saying is that if you haven't been in the Situation Room, pouring through intelligence and meeting directly with our military folks and asking what are all our options and examining what are all the consequences and understanding that, for example, if you set up a no-fly zone, that you may not be actually solving the problem on the ground, or if you set up a humanitarian corridor, are you in fact committed not only to stopping aircrafts from going over that corridor, but also missiles? Have we mapped all of the chemical weapons facilities inside of Syria to make sure that we don't drop a bomb on a chemical weapons facility that ends up then dispersing chemical weapons and killing civilians, which is exactly what we're trying to prevent? Unless you've been involved in those conversations, then it's kind of hard for you to understand the complexities of the situation and how we have to not rush into one more war in the Middle East. And we've got, unfortunately...
But that's why people think you're hesitant, because you do not want to get involved in another conflict.
Charlie, that shouldn't just be my concern. That should be everybody's concern. We went through that. We know what it's like to rush into a war in the Middle East without having thought it through. It is very easy to slide your way into deeper and deeper commitments, because if it's not working immediately, then what ends up happening is 6 months from now, people say, well, you gave the heavy artillery, now what we really need is X, and now what we really need is Y. Because until Assad is defeated, in this view, it's never going to be enough, right? Now, on the other side, there are folks who say, we are so scarred from Iraq, we should have learned our lesson, we should not have anything to do with it. Well, I reject that view as well, because the fact of the matter is that we've got serious interests there. And not only humanitarian interests, we can't have a situation of ongoing chaos in a major country that borders a country like Jordan, which in turn borders Israel. And we have a legitimate need to be engaged and to be involved.
He certainly laid out his position very well. And when you said, Charlie, when he said to you, unless you've been in the conversations, it's kind of hard to get involved with knowing the information that he has. But when you certainly challenged him. You certainly challenged him with what he had to say. What were you going to say, Nora? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, 90% of the deaths that have taken place have not taken place because of the airstrikes. That he's calculated this the way he was thinking out loud in your interview and trying to explain to you, if we drop bombs, we may hit the chemical weapons facilities and then have civilian casualties. A humanitarian corridor may not work because of this. Extraordinary to hear his thinking out loud like that.
You know what's interesting, Nora, and you reminded me of that this morning, It is. You remember when Bill Clinton was called, even by the president, the great explainer?
Yeah.
I mean, I think he feels some sense that he has not done a good job at explaining his own mind. And this was some effort to try to get at that, as you suggest.
There's another part in the interview, too, where you ask him about, why did it take you so long? A year ago, you could have decided to help arm the
urged
rebels.
by McCain and others.
Right, and he said, and then a year from now, after we've armed them, people would say, well, why aren't you doing more? And then he said you end up slip sliding into further engagement in the Middle East. I think that's the first time we've really heard the president in long form really explain his thinking on Syria.
I think there's also some sense that, I mean, he understands, because he's been involved in the withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan. If you get drawn back into that, it also interrupts whatever your domestic agenda is, and the belief that you got to fix America too, both economically and otherwise, in terms of an investment in the future.
It was just good to hear a long-form conversation where he really lays out what he's thinking.
I agree. I agree.